I want to share some of my experiences being involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses. I really don't want to be on camera, so please don't think any less of me for using this method to share my story. I was a born in Jehovah's Witness, an only child, and the only witness kid in my town. For the most part, I tolerated the limitations resulting from this situation very well. In some of my earliest memories, I remember thinking of God as a loving God who loved me for me, unconditionally, as I was. I was fairly young when I had an intuitive feeling about the religion I was born into. I didn't understand this feeling at that age, but I was very aware of it, and it always concerned me. As I got a little older, God was no longer unconditional love incarnate to me. He was a confusing God with his finger on the smite button and an endless list of rules that I knew I could never live up to. I struggled with my intuitive feeling versus what I had been taught was the truth. My head told me one thing, but my heart told me something totally different. I always felt guilty for not being able to be perfect and without blemish. I felt like an absolute failure because my faith was so weak and I could never live up to what I was told were Jehovah's standards. As a young child, I felt like I was already doomed to eternal death because I knew I'd never cut it as a good Jehovah's Witness. Guilt and fear over this was always gnawing at me. I felt completely out of place at school and at meetings. I hated that I didn't feel normal compared to anyone else, either inside the congregation or in the outside world. Within the congregation, I watched others my own age, or even younger, making great spiritual progress. I knew that I had to start progressing before more people asked when I would be making my first steps to serve Jehovah. So, against every fiber of my true self, I joined Theocratic Ministry School and became an unbaptized publisher. Nothing about it ever felt right, but at this point I knew that I would have to force myself to make any progress at all. I assumed, as always, that something was wrong with me and it was sheer lack of motivation that was holding me back. Deep down my real self was screaming to be set free. In my early teen years, I prayed all the time for Jehovah to change this in me, but it never happened. Again, I watched my peers at the congregation leaping ahead of me and getting baptized. I decided that it was time to get serious, but I knew that my dedication would mean nothing to God if it didn't come from my heart. I began supplicating Jehovah in prayer to move my heart to get in line with my head. Nothing happened. I decided to give God some time and listen instead of doing all the talking. Again, no answer. I started to get very frustrated with Jehovah and finally decided to pray to him what I felt in my heart instead of what was just in my head. For the first time in a long time, I prayed to the God of unconditional love that I had known as a child. I was confused, angry and frustrated with him, and told him that if this was truly his one and only organization on earth, then how dare he deny my request to put his will in my heart? How dare he deny me everything else that seemed to come so easily and make so much sense to so many people around me in the congregation? How dare he condemn me to eternal death that way? I laid it all on the line. I had been begging him to put the truth in my heart for more than a year by that time. This was the last time I would ask. If he didn't love me enough to do this for me, then I would take this life, here and now, and make the best of it. I would let my real self live instead of trying to cage it. If this was it for me, I'd better live now instead of spending time worrying about being a failure as a Jehovah's Witness. After this prayer, I found a certain level of contentment. I had been honest with God. In time, I would either feel drawn to serve Jehovah as the Watchtower organization said was required, or I would not. Either way, I was going to leave it in God's hands and stop worrying about getting baptized for now. I refused to care about what others in the congregation might be thinking about me. I was going to forget about it all and clear my head. I started to enjoy the true friendships I had with worldly people at school, instead of feeling guilty that I wasn't putting more effort into making fake friendships with people in the congregation. I discovered that there were people out there who would take me as I was, faults and all. They didn't judge me based on a group status or how many times I was willing to subject myself to the horror of the microphone at the Kingdom Hall each meeting. just to give the ridiculously obvious answer to the questions at the end of each paragraph they'd just spent way too long going over. Rarely had I ever been able to truly be myself before then. I was beginning to feel like my life actually had some real meaning to it. I will continue with another video at a later time, but I hope this was a good start. I hope that someone else will be able to identify with some of what I've said and perhaps feel some comfort in knowing that they are not alone.